My name is Monica Blake, and for 12 years I was the woman behind the curtain. You know the type. The one who stays late tweaking the numbers no one else notices, who preps the slides for a presentation her manager delivers with a smug smile, who brings the ideas that change everything but watches someone else get the applause. I worked in product development at Alden & Knox, a mid-sized tech firm with big dreams and even bigger egos. I wasn't flashy. I didn't schmooze. I didn't need to. My work spoke for itself. Until one day, it didn't. That day came wrapped in fake praise and thinly veiled betrayal. I had spent 3 months developing a new feature for our flagship software, a predictive algorithm for customer retention that could save millions. It wasn't just a project. It was my passion. I tested every line of code, cross-checked every data point, and wrote the white paper that proved its value. I submitted it through the proper channels, hoping it would finally earn me a seat at the table. What I didn't expect was that someone else had already pulled up a chair with my work in their hands. His name was Derek Langston, my team lead, self-proclaimed innovator, and full-time snake in business casual. He took my white paper, slapped his name on it, pitched it to the board during a closed-door strategy session, and walked out a week later with a promotion to Director of Innovation. The company hailed him as a visionary. I got a pat on the back, and a vague promise that my time would come. It didn't. For the next few weeks, I watched him fumble through implementation meetings, regurgitate my data with the finesse of someone who didn't understand half of it, and take credit for every milestone I delivered. Every time I tried to raise the issue, I was told not to make waves. Be a team player, Monica. There's enough success for everyone. Except there wasn't. There was only room for the loudest voice in the room, and mine was never invited. At first, I was angry, then I was quiet. But silence is not surrender, it's strategy. I started documenting everything, every email, every version history. Every Slack message with my original timestamps. I made copies, backed them up, and stored them on drives only I could access. I didn't go to HR. I didn't scream in meetings. I played the game. Because the truth is, Derek may have stolen my work, but he didn't know how to build it. And eventually, someone was going to need the person who actually understood the system he was pretending to lead. That moment came faster than I expected. Just 2 months into the rollout, the feature began failing. Clients reported inaccurate forecasts. Retention dropped instead of improving. Panic spread across the upper ranks. Derek panicked too, of course, but not because he understood the tech. No, he panicked because he had no idea how to fix what he never truly created. And so, like clockwork, they came knocking. Monica, could you take a look at this? Monica, can we borrow your brain for a sec? I smiled, I listened, I nodded, and I did fix it, but only just enough to keep things afloat. Then I waited, because I knew something they didn't. The feature wasn't broken because of bad code. It was broken because I made sure it would be if someone tampered with it without knowing how it worked. It was my code, my signature, my landmine, and Derek had stepped right onto it. So when the board called a meeting to reassess leadership and innovation, I arrived early, with a folder full of receipts and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. This time, I wasn't the woman behind the curtain. I was the one pulling it back. The morning of the board meeting, I arrived 2 hours early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to feel the room before the others filled it with their false confidence and half-truths. The conference room on the top floor of Alden and Knox was a sterile, modern battlefield. Polished glass walls, a 10-foot projection screen, ergonomic chairs that still somehow managed to feel cold. I chose the seat farthest from the head of the table and placed my folder on the table. It was thick, heavy with evidence, annotated emails, revision histories, and printouts of Slack conversations. Each page had a sticky note. Each sticky note was color-coded. I had prepared for this like a trial, because in many ways it was. Derek arrived late. Of course he did. That had become his trademark lately. Swagger and late, say something vague but confident, then ride the wave of someone else's panic. Today he looked more rumpled than usual. The cracks were beginning to show. His once impeccable grooming now betrayed a hint of stubble, and the dark circles under his eyes weren't just from lack of sleep. He glanced at me as he entered, and I returned the look with a smile that said, "I've already won." The other executives trickled in: COO, CFO, head of legal, and 2 board members flown in from New York. Our CEO, a man named Grant Ellis, walked in last and made a theatrical show of checking his watch before sitting down at the head of the table. He cleared his throat, adjusted his cuffs, and said, "Let's get started. We have a lot to unpack." That was an understatement. For the next 30 minutes, Derek did what Derek does best. He deflected, he redirected, he regurgitated buzzwords like synergy and AI-enhanced architecture without actually answering the real question. Why was the feature crashing? Why were clients threatening to leave? Why did a system that was supposed to revolutionize customer retention suddenly become a liability? I watched him flounder, and I waited. I waited until he tried to bring me into it. "Well," he said, gesturing vaguely in my direction, "Monica here helped with the technical side of things, but the broader strategy was mine." That was my cue. "That's not accurate," I said calmly. All heads turned. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I opened the folder in front of me and slid a document across the table. This is the original project proposal, dated 6 months ago. You'll notice the author's name, mine, and the version history attached. Grant raised an eyebrow as he took it. I didn't stop there. Here are the Git logs. Every line of code for the initial prototype was committed from my machine. Time-stamped. Verified. I slid another stack forward. "And these," I said, handing out color-printed emails, "are conversations between Derek and myself. Note: the dates, all after the initial build. In these, he asks for clarification on how the model works, which is interesting, considering he claims to have built it." Silence. Not the awkward kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that comes before decisions. "Are you saying Derek misrepresented his role?" one of the board members asked. I didn't blink. "I'm saying Derek stole my work, lied about it, and wasn't qualified to lead its implementation. That's why it failed." Derek scoffed. "This is ridiculous. Monica has always had a chip on her shoulder about not being recognized. This is just her way of what?" I interrupted, turning to face him fully. "Of exposing the truth?" I leaned forward. "Let's talk about how the system failed. The module failed because it was altered by someone who didn't understand the dependencies in the code. That someone was you." I tapped my folder. "I documented every single change, and I created a backdoor, one that would trigger a cascade of non-critical failures if key protocols were bypassed." Which they were. By you. Derek turned red, then pale, then red again. The board murmured among themselves. One of them whispered something to Grant. Grant looked at me, his tone suddenly professional, even deferential. "Monica, why didn't you come forward sooner?" I met his gaze. "Because I knew no one would believe me without proof, and because if I was going to speak, I wanted it to be undeniable." The legal counsel cleared her throat. "We'll need to investigate all this, of course, but based on the documentation presented..." She glanced at Grant, who gave a tight nod. Grant looked at Derek. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties pending further review." Derek stood up so fast his chair skidded back. "You're making a huge mistake. She manipulated all of you. She sabotaged the rollout." "No," I said. "I protected it. From people like you." He stormed out. No one followed him. When the room settled, Grant turned to me again. "We're going to need someone to stabilize the product. Someone who understands it inside and out. Someone who can lead." I tilted my head. "Is that an offer?" "It's a conversation," he said. "Let's continue it upstairs." As the others filed out, I stayed behind just long enough to close my folder, straighten the papers, and savor the silence. I had come into this room as a footnote. I left it as a headline. And this was just the beginning. Becoming interim director of innovation should have felt like a triumph. And in some ways it did, just not in the way most people expected. I didn't pop champagne or buy a new suit. I didn't post a triumphant LinkedIn update thanking the company for this incredible opportunity. Instead, I showed up earlier. I watched more. And most importantly, I listened. because you can learn everything about a company not from its public statements, but from its whispers. The first thing I learned was that Derek had left a mess behind, bigger than anyone realized. The algorithm issue was just the tip of a crumbling iceberg. There were back-end systems held together with shortcuts, user feedback loops that had been ignored for quarters, and a growing list of disgruntled clients who felt they'd been sold a shiny promise with no substance underneath. I didn't panic. I did what I've always done. I worked. I met with the engineers individually. I asked questions, not to test them, but to understand what had been broken before I got there. I stayed late poring over dashboards and user data. And slowly, the narrative began to shift. People who once ignored me in the elevator now stopped to ask how I was holding up. A junior dev named Priya left a sticky note on my door one morning. "Thanks for asking about the bug I flagged in April. No one ever followed up until you." That note stayed on my monitor for weeks, but not everyone was happy, especially not the clique of middle managers who had ridden Derek's coattails for years. They saw my rise as a fluke, something temporary, laughable even. One of them, Craig Renner, made a particularly loud comment near the espresso machine one day. "Guess all you need to run innovation now is a good sob story and a folder of screenshots." I didn't react. I just smiled and made a mental note. Craig had no idea he'd just moved himself to the top of my internal audit list. I started pulling his project logs that afternoon. Turns out Craig hadn't delivered a fully functional product in 18 months, but he sure had delivered plenty of long lunches and vague status updates. I scheduled a meeting with him the following Monday. "Walk me through your roadmap for Q2, I asked. He blinked. "It's in the presentation I sent." "I'd like to hear it from you," I said, folding my hands. 10 minutes in, he was sweating. By the end of the week, his access had been downgraded, and he'd been reassigned to a supporting role under someone 10 years younger than him. Quietly, strategically, no fireworks, just results. Meanwhile, I began rebuilding the client trust Derek had burned. I reached out to the 5 biggest accounts myself, not from a script, but with full transparency. "You were promised a tool that would understand your customers better," I told one of them, the VP of sales at a national telecom firm. "What you got was a half-built skeleton. I'm here to fix that. And I won't disappear after the contract is signed." It worked. By the end of the quarter, renewal rates began climbing again. Revenue projections stabilized. My name, once buried beneath Derek's self-promoting noise, started showing up in internal reports, whispered in boardroom halls, and most importantly, respected in the development floor where the real work happened. Still, I knew interim was just that. Temporary. I didn't want to be a placeholder. I wanted permanence, power, protection. So I did something that made people very uncomfortable. I asked for it. During my next review with Grant, I laid out everything: my progress metrics, staff turnover improvements, client renewals, code refactors, all of it. Then I said plainly, "If this were a man doing this job, you'd have already dropped the word interim. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm stating a fact. I've earned the role. Make it official." Grant didn't flinch. He just nodded once and said, "Let me take it to the board." 3 days later, my title changed. No fanfare, no ceremony, just an email from HR and a new badge that read, Monica Blake, Director of Innovation. But the biggest shift wasn't the badge. It was in the eyes of the people around me. Suddenly, meetings started 5 minutes earlier, my calendar filled with requests for one-on-ones. People who had once pretended not to know my name now greeted me with deference. I didn't bask in it. I used it. I started mentoring 2 junior developers who reminded me of myself 10 years ago. Sharp, overlooked, underestimated. I invited them to key meetings, gave them credit publicly, and taught them how to build not just systems, but reputations that couldn't be erased. One afternoon, Priya walked into my office with a stunned look. "You're not like the others," she said. I smiled. "That's how I got here." And as she walked out, I realized something else. I hadn't just climbed the ladder they tried to pull away. I had started building a new one where people like me didn't have to claw their way up alone. I had almost forgotten the sound of his voice. Almost. It had been 6 weeks since Derek Langston vanished from the building. His badge deactivated, his name wiped off the org chart, his legacy disassembled like the hollow structure it truly was. I had assumed he would lick his wounds in silence or crawl to another startup willing to buy into his polished persona. But Derek wasn't the silent type. He was the kind that festered. And on a rainy Thursday afternoon, he reappeared. I was reviewing system updates in my office when my assistant buzzed in. "You might want to come out here," she said, her voice low. "You have a visitor." I stepped into the hallway and saw him standing there, as smug as ever, rain dripping from his trench coat, eyes scanning the room like he still owned it. Derek. Of course. He didn't say hello, didn't ask if I had time. He just spoke, as if the weeks hadn't passed. "We need to talk." I folded my arms. "We don't." "This is bigger than us," he said. "There are things happening that you don't." "No?" I almost laughed. "Like what? Someone else stealing my work?" His jaw clenched, but he kept going. "You think you've won, Monica, but you don't see what's coming. This company, Grant the board, they'll use you the same way they used me. You're just the next distraction." It was pathetic, and it was predictable. "No, Derek," I said. "I'm not the distraction. I'm the correction." I turned to leave, but he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not safe. There are emails, internal threads, about restructuring. You think that corner office means power? It means target. Ask yourself why they gave you everything so easily." And with that, he walked away, just as suddenly as he'd appeared. I stood there for a moment, frozen, not with fear, but with fury. Derek was bluffing. He had to be. But something in his voice, in his desperation, gnawed at me. So I did what I do best. I investigated. That night, long after the building emptied, I sat in my office with a thermos of stale coffee and began combing through the internal document archive. Permissions, restructure memos, archived reports. I wasn't looking for gossip. I was looking for patterns. And eventually, I found them. A series of anonymized strategy notes flagged under Q4 executive realignment. Vague language, but the implications were clear. 2 director-level positions were under review. No names, no dates, but one of them matched the outline of my department. The next morning, I confronted Grant. I didn't ambush him. I scheduled a meeting like a professional. But when he entered, he knew something was off. "You're here early," he said. "Always am," I replied. I slid the printed notes across his desk. "Are we restructuring?" He glanced at the pages and sighed. "Where did you get these?" "Not the question you should be asking." He sat down. "Look, Monica, this isn't what you think." "Then tell me what it is." "It's exploratory. The board asked for contingencies. Not because of performance, but because we're courting a merger. A big one. With Faraday Tech." I blinked. That name wasn't just big, it was seismic. Faraday Tech had been a competitor for years. A merger would change everything. Why wasn't I told? Because it wasn't finalized. And because, frankly, it affects everyone differently. If the merger happens, overlapping departments will be evaluated. I nodded slowly. "So I built this program, saved our contracts, fixed your mess, and I might still be out of a job next quarter." "That's not what I said." "It's what you didn't deny." He leaned forward. "Let me be clear, if it were up to me, you'd have nothing to worry about. But I don't control the board. What I can do is give you access, be transparent. You deserve that." I didn't thank him. I didn't need favors. I needed leverage. And I knew how to get it. That weekend, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Rachel Chu, my former mentor and now CTO at a fast-growing analytics firm. She picked up on the second ring. "You finally decided to call me back?" she teased. "I heard you dethroned a few kings." "Something like that," I said. "You still looking for innovation leadership?" "Always," she replied. "But I thought you were finally getting your due." "Maybe, maybe not. I just want to know my options." "Come in Monday. No promises, but let's talk." And just like that, I had leverage. When I returned to work Monday morning, I wasn't the same Monica who stared down Derek in that boardroom. I was something else now, untouchable, because I wasn't clinging to a title. I was evaluating it, watching how people treated me when they thought I might leave. That week, Grant called me in again. "Faraday deal is accelerating," he said. "You'll be looped in soon." "I already am," I replied. He raised an eyebrow. "You met with someone." "I did. I told you I'd protect what I built." He studied me for a moment, then smiled. "You're not just playing the game anymore. I'm writing the rules." And deep down, I knew something else. This wasn't about keeping a seat at the table anymore. It was about building my own. The merger was no longer a rumor. It had a timeline, legal teams, transition consultants, and an internal code name, Project Equinox. I hated how poetic that sounded. It wasn't balance. It was a corporate collision, and like any impact, there would be casualties. Most people walked around the office whispering guesses, terrified of what roles would be eliminated. But I wasn't guessing. I was planning. The first thing I did was map out every department Faraday Tech overlapped with ours. Then I built a silent profile on every person rumored to be their counterpart to me, their projects, their KPIs, their scandals, public or buried, and finally, their allies. Because mergers aren't about products, they're about people, about power. I also paid attention to who at Alden and Knox started acting differently, who leaned closer to the Faraday team when they visited, who changed their tone in meetings, and more tellingly, who suddenly began to forget to invite me. One afternoon, I noticed a calendar event labeled Innovation Strategy Roundtable, closed, on Grant's assistant's shared calendar. I wasn't on the invite, my own department. I smiled, took a screenshot, and said nothing. That night, I called Rachel again. "Still interested?" I asked. "I'm assembling a team," she said. "I want someone who's played dirty and survived." "That's me," I replied. "But I have one more move to make." Because as much as I could walk away and succeed, I wasn't done here yet. Not until I controlled the very room they tried to push me out of. I began feeding quiet truths into the right places. I scheduled casual coffee chats with 2 board members, both of whom had been present during the Derek takedown. I didn't badmouth anyone. I just laid out my vision: post-merger structure, integration strategy, predictive models for retention across dual platforms. I spoke in terms only a builder could use, not a politician. And slowly, the tide shifted. One of them even said, "You think 5 steps ahead. That's rare in this place." I smiled. I had to survive. Then came the Faraday Joint Leadership Mixer, just a name for a power showdown in the form of wine and hors d'oeuvres, the kind of event where eyes say more than the speeches. I wore black, not trendy black, commanding black, sleek, cold. I shook hands with people who once read my name at the bottom of memos they never responded to. One man from Faraday tried to corner me with passive-aggressive charm. "You must be the surprise star I've been hearing about. You know this position might get consolidated, right?" I sipped my drink and answered, "Then I guess we'll see whose performance history they like more." He didn't smile after that. A week later, the decision came down. The Faraday merger would proceed, and yes, my role was one of the duplicated ones. But instead of a quiet cut, I was offered something unexpected: Chief Product Integration Officer, a new title, a new team, reporting directly to the CEO at both companies. It wasn't a promotion, it was a declaration. The room that once overlooked me had just handed me the keys to the future. When the news dropped, my inbox flooded with congratulations. Some were genuine, most were polite panic. The ones that mattered were from Priya and 2 others from my team. "You earned this, not with noise, but with precision." I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because I knew this wasn't the end of the game. It was just the moment I flipped. The board. The ones who once erased my name were now updating their org charts to report to me. And Derek? I hadn't heard from him again. But I imagined he read the press release. I imagined he knew that the woman he once stole from now had a seat at the table he never deserved. I imagined it burned. Good. Because this time I didn't just survive their system. I reprogrammed it and made sure it had no place for people like him. Power is addictive. It creeps in subtly. At first, it feels like control, like breathing without fear. Then it becomes something heavier. At the height of the merger, I sat in meetings where million-dollar decisions were made with a nod. I signed off on contracts that would outlast most executives in the room. I approved restructuring plans that, ironically, put many Derek types exactly where they belonged, outside the company. But with every gain came a question I hadn't expected. What now? For so long, my fight was about survival. Then it became about justice. But once justice was served, once the empire started to reshape under my direction, I realized I wasn't fulfilled. I was effective, yes. Respected, absolutely. But happy? Not even close. And then, one morning, it happened. I received a forwarded email, accidentally CC'd to me by a junior analyst. It was from Grant, sent to the Faraday, CFO. It read, "Monica's a great interim solution, gives the appearance of progressive leadership. She's bought us time until a more polished candidate appears. Interim, solution, appearance. Every word sliced clean through the narrative. I thought I had rewritten. That night, I didn't work late. I went home, sat on my balcony, and looked at the city lights like they were blinking lies. They saw the title, the badge, the team. I saw the trap. I wasn't their boss. I was their buffer. I wasn't their future. I was their facade. That weekend, I called Rachel again. Let's talk for real this time, I said. By Monday, I had an offer. Partner, ownership stake, total creative control. It wasn't a safety net. It was an escape tunnel. But I wasn't going to slink away in silence. No, I wanted them to feel it. So I planned my exit like I planned everything else, precisely. I scheduled a full company town hall titled A Vision Forward. They assumed it was a roadmap presentation. And it was, just not theirs. I walked on stage in a tailored white blazer, looked out at the hundreds of faces who had once passed me in hallways like I didn't exist, and began. Years ago, I sat in this building and watched someone take credit for work they didn't understand. I stayed silent. Then I fought. Then I won. But lately, I've realized that winning inside someone else's rigged system isn't victory. It's maintenance. And I wasn't built to maintain. I was built to build. I clicked the slide behind me, revealing the logo of Rachel's firm, now bearing my name. Gasps, whispers, flashing phones. I'm leaving Alden and Knox, I said, calmly. Not because I've lost, but because I've outgrown it. The next slide displayed my new title, Co-founder and Chief Vision Officer. Some of you will follow me. Some of you won't. But all of you should know this. Don't let any room define your value. Don't wait to be chosen. Choose yourself. When I walked off stage, the applause didn't matter. The chaos that followed didn't matter. Grant's wide-eyed shock, the frantic emails, the offers to discuss alternatives, none of it mattered. I was already gone. That evening, I passed the empty office where Derek once sat. It had since been repainted, refurnished, but I paused. Not for him, for me. The girl who once stayed late, hoping to be noticed. She was gone too. In her place stood a woman who had burned the script and written her own ending. And that ending? It was only the beginning. 6 months have passed since I walked out of Alden and Knox for the last time. I've replayed that exit in my mind more times than I care to admit. Not out of regret, but out of disbelief. For so long, that place had been my whole world. I had tied my value to its metrics, my dreams to its promotions, my peace to its approval. And now, it's just a name on a building I pass without flinching. At my new company, we don't have corner offices or a marble lobby. Our headquarters is a repurposed co-working space downtown. The coffee is always too strong, the HVAC is temperamental, and there's a dog named Peanut who shows up to meetings more often than half our staff. But it's ours. It's mine. And more importantly, it's real. The people I work with now don't ask me to prove I belong. They ask what I need to go further. That's a question I never thought I'd hear. One of the young women on my team, Jada, 27, brilliant, blunt, and wildly impatient, asked me last week, was it worth it? All the waiting, all the years of being overlooked? I didn't answer right away, because the truth is complicated. Was it worth the pain? The silence? The rage I had to swallow just to keep my job? No. Not a second of that was ever worth it. But was the fight worth it? The late nights when I could have quit but didn't? The risks I took to expose the truth? The final moment when I told my story on my terms and didn't flinch? Yes, that was worth everything. I told Jada this. Don't wait to be allowed in. Build the door, then tear off the hinges so no one else has to knock. She smiled, then asked if she could borrow my espresso machine. I said yes. At Alden. And Knox, I kept my office door shut. Here I leave it open. People wander in with ideas, complaints, wild pitches. No one whispers in hallways anymore. They don't have to. Last month, Priya joined our team. She left Alden and Knox after being passed over for the third time in a year. She sent me a one-line message. I'm ready to work somewhere that doesn't punish me for being quiet. I hired her immediately. Yesterday, she led her first project pitch. It was sharp, smart, and unapologetically hers. I didn't take notes. I just watched her step into the light the way no one had ever let me do at her age. That was the real win, not the job titles, not the press, not the backhanded LinkedIn messages from old colleagues suddenly remembering I exist. The win was creating a space where someone like me wouldn't have to survive the way I did. A few weeks ago, I received a letter, yes, an actual letter, printed and mailed. It was from Derek. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. It was short, no apology, just 2 lines. You were right. I never understood what you built, but I understand now what it cost me to steal it. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say, because this isn't his story anymore. It never really was. It's mine. And if you're reading this, if you've ever sat in a room and watched someone else speak your thoughts out loud, wear your work like a borrowed coat and take what you bled for, then let me tell you something. You are not weak for staying. You are not bitter for remembering, and you are not wrong for wanting the credit you deserve. You are simply in the middle of your own rewrite. Don't rush it. Don't settle for a supporting role. One day, if you keep going, you will walk into a room and realize they no longer have the power to take anything from you because you built something they can't steal. And that, no matter how long it takes, is the sweetest kind of revenge.